Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out for this conversation, and thanks to Pierce. I think the presentations that you'll see from the Commission and from the Internet Society have a lot in common, and also I think a lot that we can learn and share from one another. So I appreciate that. I know Internet Society, Kathy Brown was in Brussels yesterday for the event, so there's a lot of talk going on about the future. So this is, I think, a good moment. I think a number of us have reached the conclusion that, as you said, this is the time to look up, to look out, look into the future, and think carefully about the kind of internet that we want over the next 5 to 10 years. I was asked here to walk you through a project that the Internet Society has taken on beginning last year in 2016 to think through many of the issues that Pierce raised as well about what are the things that are driving the future of the internet, what are the values that we hold dear, and what are the things that we all collectively need to do to bring about the kind of future that we want. And so we are reaching a point in this project where we are approaching some conclusions, or at least a report that we can give to the community. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of a preview in terms of some of the things that we're finding. And so I have slides, which I suppose is unfortunate, but there we go. I think it's important when we look at the future of the internet, this is not about saying we have a crystal ball that we can predict the future. But rather, particularly at the Internet Society, this is our 25th anniversary. I'm supposed to do the shameless plug, so there we go. We have some history as a community to draw on. We have some background in how the internet developed. We have some ideas about what has made it successful, and I think as a community we can draw on that basis of information and look to the future and project into the future some of the things that we think are either concerning to us or the opportunities that we want to preserve. So as I said, in 2016 we launched this effort, the Internet Futures Project, at the Internet Society, and many organizations do things like scenario planning. It's a tool that's often used to get people in a room to think big, to think differently, to think creatively about what the future might hold, and then make some decisions about how their organization or company or government might act in light of that. We decided to turn that on its head a little bit at the Internet Society and do this effort as a global community. For those of you who are familiar with the Internet Society, we have chapters and members all over the world. We interact with people like yourselves in communities everywhere. And so we thought we would really take advantage of that to get input from our community over the course of the last 18 months on what they believe are the things that are driving the future of the internet. So we did this through a number of roundtables, with interviews, with surveys. The surveys keep going, so I think some of these numbers might be a little out of date. But the idea is that through all of this, we've gotten a lot of very interesting information from our community in terms of the things that, from where they sit in the ecosystem, whether it's business person in Africa or a civil society person in the United States or an academic in India, what are the things that they believe are driving the future? This will culminate in September in our Global Internet Report, and will then be the basis of our annual meeting at the Internet Society, which will take place largely online as a meeting that goes around the globe in mid-September. So as I said, the goal here is to understand the forces of change. What do we think will drive the future of the internet? Get a global perspective on what that trajectory looks like, and then importantly, I think, try to make some recommendations with a dose of humility, but make some recommendations on what we think different stakeholders, including the Internet Society, might do to shape that future that we want. So this is what our community has come forward with, and I'll just walk you through this a little bit. Rather than doing just 4 scenarios about the future, which is often how this works, you get in a little quadrant and you plan the future. what we found in our community is that people are focused on about 6 different areas that they think are driving the future. And I'll just walk through these briefly. This notion, and this is not going to be a surprise to many of you in this room, how the internet interacts with the physical world, the deployment of IoT that's ongoing now, that's only going to accelerate, that will have an impact on how the internet rolls out. Obviously, the internet economy, consolidation or competition. Can somebody start the next new big thing, or will the big players kind of close out future opportunities for entrepreneurship? The role of government. I think it's very clear that government is playing a bigger and bigger role in the internet. How that role takes shape, the kinds of interventions that governments make in the marketplace, the reactions to security, the reactions to rights and freedoms. These are the sorts of things that are going to change the future of the internet in the minds of our community. Obviously, things related to cyber threats. We know that cybercrime, cyber attacks, cyber terrorism, cyber war, these are all things that are on the minds of many of us. We see it often. We know it's only going to accelerate. How those things, how these kinds of cyber attacks take hold, the ability of the community to address them is going to shape the future of the internet. Interestingly, issues related to artificial intelligence came up across the board. That this was an area that people are really thinking about. They're not really sure how it's going to affect them, but they're very focused on this issue of artificial intelligence and what it means for the future. And then finally, network standards and interoperability. Can the network itself and the standards organizations that support it evolve and change to meet the demands of the future? There's a real question about whether open standards will continue to be accepted, or whether we'll see a move to proprietary networks, whether there will be the right incentives to do the things at the network layer that many of us don't look at every day, but that will allow the network to grow and scale. So those 6 areas are interesting, I think. But what we found was even more interesting was that our community was looking at the interactions between these drivers. They're not just saying IoT is going to shape the future and that's it, but rather they're looking at what are the interactions between things like the deployment of IoT and how the marketplace unfolds, or the role of government in reaction to cyber threats. But even more important than that, I think, to us, is this group of issues that we call impact areas. The community is very focused on 3 main areas in terms of the future of the internet. The first being the future of personal rights and freedoms. What is the implication of marketplace consolidation or competition on my ability to speak freely going forward, my ability to create the next big thing? The evolution of the digital divide. We hear a lot that it's not going to be, in the future, it's not going to be about who has access to technology and who doesn't, but I think this is something similar to what you said, is what will my ability be to do something with that access? Will I be able to benefit from the opportunities of the internet? So it's not just about being online or offline, but do I have access to the benefits itself? There's also something that we're starting to see in terms of the digital divide shaping around security. People who have the capacity or access to security technologies or the ability to protect themselves versus people who don't, and the divides that might bring about. And then finally, the implications of all of this for media, culture, and society. So again, going back to these drivers, what does it mean? And I think this is a conversation that will happen in the next panel, but what does the deployment of artificial intelligence mean for society? We hear a lot about the loss of human agency, the ability of people to make decisions for themselves. And what does that mean for society at large as you have displacement of industries and disruption in the marketplace? So these are things that people are interested in, but as I said, the thing I would emphasize that we are taking away from this is that none of these things acts in isolation, but that there's these interactions between them. And I'll just go very quickly through the rest of this. The way we'll shape the report is to try to take some quotes from the community, from the interviews, as well as some of the data from the surveys. And I think one here that we found was particularly interesting is this idea that the economy is changing far faster than the rules that are governing it. The system we have in place to regulate business is stuck in a 20th century notion of how the economy works. So this idea that do we have the tools, the policy tools to actually deal with the technology that's coming before us? And what do we have to do today to make that possible? We do hear a lot of worry from our community about the role that regulation will play and whether regulation and the regulatory tools we have today are up to the task. On artificial intelligence, this is a quote that I love. This is from one of the Internet Hall of Fame experts. You have the uncertainty of what the inputs are, the magic of what the process is doing and driving at a conclusion which are for our good. And that is a terrifying prospect in my mind because we have no idea what's going on. This is from somebody who helped create the internet from the earliest days, who's still thinking about the deployment of artificial intelligence and really wondering what does this mean for humanity. And so on the one hand, people see artificial intelligence as a huge opportunity space, a huge new direction, or some people would say we've been heading in this direction for many years. On the other hand, people don't understand how that's going to affect them as individual human beings. And I won't go too much, I'll stop here. As I said, we're going to be making some recommendations as a result of this. I think one of the conclusions that's interesting is in all of these drivers and in all these impact areas, the thing that comes out over and over again is people are thinking about what is the role of civil society going forward, and they're not sure if civil society will still have a seat at the table. So I think we as a community need to be thinking very carefully to make sure that end user voices, the voices of civil society, are still part of the model. And I know everybody is reticent to talk about the multi-stakeholder model, but people draw on that to ensure that they have a seat in the table, that they have a part in the discussion. So I think we need to be really focused on that. So I will stop there. We hope that you will participate in all of this. I think there's a lot in common with what the Commission is doing. And I think, Renalia, will hand it over to you and your group to continue the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sally. Thank you.